Last year, we reported extensively on a strange and surprising story about the FBI. FBI agents were interviewing a guy who was potentially a really interesting witness and or suspect. He not only might have been a relevant witness to the Boston Marathon bombing because he knew one of the two bombing suspects, but he also might have had information about an unsolved, gruesome triple murder that took place in the Boston area on the 10-year anniversary of 9/11 back in 2011. And what was bizarre and surprising about that FBI story is that the FBI shot and killed that guy while they were questioning him. State troopers and FBI agents outnumbered the guy 4-1. The FBI agents and the troopers were all armed. The guy was not. But somehow, the night they were questioning him in his apartment in Florida, the guy ended up not just dead, but shot 7 times by one of the FBI agents who had been conducting the interview. It was a strange and surprising story. What was not surprising about that story was that when the FBI reviewed that shooting, their review concluded that the shooting was fine. No problem. It was a good shoot. No disciplinary action will be taken. No further investigation is necessary. And the reason that was not a surprise when the FBI exonerated itself is because in the immediate aftermath of that guy getting killed in Florida, a New York Times reporter named Charlie Savage, he reaped the benefits of a Freedom of Information Act request that he had filed for the results of previous shooting reviews by the FBI. At the time that Florida shooting happened, the FBI had been telling the press, don't worry, we have an effective, time-tested process for addressing shootings like this internally. Don't worry, we know how to deal with this stuff. And yes, their process for reviewing shooting incidents is a time-tested process. They've been doing it for a long time. But what Charlie Savage found out is that the results of those reviews are jaw-dropping. It turns out between 1993 and 2011, so an almost 20-year period, there were 150 cases where FBI agents shot someone, 70 times when an FBI agent shot and killed someone, and 80 times when an FBI agent shot and wounded someone. In those 150 cases, the FBI shooting review process ruled that all 150 of them were good shoots. Every single one of them was fine. No disciplinary action, no need for any further investigation. 150 for 150. Amazing. And so, of course, when they shot Ibrahim Todashev in Florida last year, they ruled that one was a good shoot as well. Of course they did. They always do. Literally every time. They have never, ever done anything wrong. And maybe I'm just naive and everybody expects this kind of thing, but I remain surprised, I remain even stupefied that it is not a national scandal, that story about the FBI. Shooting and killing people with 100% impunity for 2 decades. Ask me how. Maybe, though, we can top that now. Because a different federal law enforcement agency, one that's even bigger than the FBI, one with 50% more armed agents than the FBI has, their record of what they do when they shoot and kill people is a black box. It's a total unknown. There's no official statistics about how many people they've killed, but unofficial data indicates that at least 28 people have been shot and killed in this country by armed Border Patrol agents since 2010. And maybe all of those, maybe every single one of them was a good shoot and totally justified, but for those more than 24 times that an agent has shot and killed somebody, we have absolutely no idea what happened next. There's no official information available as to whether those shootings were investigated or how they were investigated. We certainly don't know if any agent was ever disciplined. We have no information about it. And I mean it. Maybe all of those 28 fatal shootings were good shoots, but we have no idea. We don't even know if there really were 28 of them. They don't even say that they have exonerated themselves the way the FBI does. At this law enforcement agency, they don't release any public information about it at all. How can this be? It's not like this is the CIA running black site prisons and this is a covert op or something. This isn't some military operation in Central Africa run through JSOC and it's all secret. This is American law enforcement on American soil, and we're not allowed to know when they kill someone? When they kill dozens of people or more? I mean, I don't mean to suggest that any or all of those shoots are necessarily bad shoots, but how can it be that we do not know at all? Last month, an immigration advocacy group filed a FOIA for abuse complaints against Border Patrol agents. These aren't about deaths, it's just abuse complaints. Again, this is a huge law enforcement force, 21,000 officers. The number of Border Patrol agents has more than doubled since 2004. Okay, this agency is ballooning. How are they doing in terms of discipline and use of force since they've been upscaling so rapidly? Again, we have no idea. There's no single complaint process if you want to tell somebody in authority about misbehavior or abuse that you've seen by a Border Patrol agent. There's no single official complaint process, which again is amazing. But the American Immigration Council filed this FOIA request specifically for complaints about abuse that somehow made it to the Internal Affairs Office at the Border Patrol. And they were able to get those records specifically. And what they found was FBI-level shocking and then some. Again, this is abuse complaints, not killings. But look at what they found. Over a 3-year period, from 2009 to 2012, they got a list of 809 abuse complaints that made it as far as the Internal Affairs Bureau at the Border Patrol. A huge number of those complaints, 40% of them, were never resolved. They're still pending, still open, no decision made of any kind. 40%. In the other 60% of the cases where a decision was made, the complaint process was closed out. And in 97% of those cases where a decision was made, the decision that was made was to take no action. 97%. And that winnows us down quite significantly. We start with 809 complaints. A total of 13 of them result in some action being taken. Yes, that's to scale. And in most of those 13 cases, the action that is taken is that somebody has to have counseling. And this is the only information that we've got about this huge law enforcement agency. A random snapshot of a 3-year chunk of some of the complaints filed against them at an agency that doesn't have a single complaint process. These are just the ones that happen to go through an office called Internal Affairs. Well, now the head of the Internal Affairs Office at the Border Patrol has been fired. He's being kept on at the agency in some other capacity, but he has been relieved of his duties as head of Internal Affairs as of this week. He's a Bush administration-era hire. He's been at the agency since 2006. In terms of the overall head of this agency, the Obama administration just put somebody new in charge of Customs and Border Patrol. His name is Gil Kerlikowski. He's a former White House drug czar and the former police chief from Seattle. He's only taken over the agency since March. But as of this week, one major head has rolled at this totally opaque agency already. The numbers that we do have out of this totally opaque agency are sort of shocking. The numbers we don't have, the stuff we have zero information about, the things about which they release zero public information, well, it's even more shocking what we're not allowed to know. Is this one head rolling this week? Is that the sign of an agency that's starting to get its house in order? Or is this the sign of an agency, a really big and important agency with a ton of political pressure on it, that might be in the process of falling apart? Joining us now is John Stanton, Washington bureau chief for BuzzFeed. John, thanks very much for being here.
It's good to be here.
So I understand that you have been doing some reporting on this story specifically, and that you've got some new stuff. What have you learned?
Well, sources of mine have told me that he was supposed to actually testify before the Senate Oversight Committee on Monday, the same day that he was conveniently fired or removed from office, and that the agency did not inform the members of the committee until, I guess, the day of the hearing, the day that he was moved out of Internal Affairs, that they weren't going to be sending him over, they were going to send his deputy over because he had been removed from those duties. And you know, I think for an agency that values its secrecy and is unwilling to talk to the press or to members of Congress or the public really at all, you know, it does raise a red flag when the guy who would know where all the bodies are buried, sort of figuratively and literally within the agency, is suddenly moved, you know, the day that he's about to go testify before Congress.
Well, I guess that's the crux of it. I mean, I know you've been working on the Border Patrol just as a story and as a sort of government accountability issue for a long time. Is there any indication from the firing specifically or from anything else about this official's past as head of Internal Affairs to suggest that he was about to be some kind of whistleblower? I mean, honestly, it wouldn't seem likely since he was the head of Internal Affairs and we know a little something about the record of Internal Affairs of that agency. But then again, he was fired the day he was going to testify, and that seems really fishy.
Yeah, you know, there are sort of conflicting pieces of evidence here. I mean, I've heard some people who say that he had sort of become committed to this idea of trying to rein in some of the cowboy behavior that's been going on along the southern border. But at the same time, he's also been at Internal Affairs during a time where you've had the majority of these shootings, fatal shootings, have happened in the last 4 or 5 years, and he's been in charge of internal affairs. One would think that this would have become a much bigger priority. There have been lots of stories about agents being involved with drug trafficking and other issues that have happened sort of throughout his tenure. So it's unclear whether or not there was something like that, or if this was the agency trying to signal to the public and to particularly advocates along the border that they were beginning to take this issue of the violence seriously. It's very, when they don't talk, they won't explain themselves, they don't tell anybody anything, so it's hard to know.
There's so much Washington noise about the issue of immigration, but the way that immigration is enforced, particularly in terms of boots on the ground at the border, this is a really big story, and I think it's about to get bigger, and we're going to be doing more coverage on this in coming days. John Stanton, Washington Bureau Chief at BuzzFeed. John, thanks very much. I think there's really something here. Thanks.
It's good to be here.
All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us.